Thank you for joining us for today's Bible study. We'll begin with prayer and then dive into God's Word together.
Jesus, thank you for this time. I ask that you speak to every one of us and help us grow closer to you during this time, and that our knowledge of you would grow, and that it wouldn't just be knowledge that we have, but it would be a life application that comes out of it. And so we ask that you would show up during this time and that you would help us just understand who you are more. Pray this in your name. Amen.
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 All right. So my screen got all messed up because I touched it on accident. You notice when he started praying, I bowed my head and I questioned one time, why do we close our eyes when we're praying? And so my wife actually started it going through the Bible, and more often than not, people, their eyes are open and they're looking up towards heaven when they're praying. So if you ever want to pray with your eyes open, especially if you're driving down the road, I think you'll be just fine in doing so. And in fact, I remember, yes, definitely do that.
Recommend it.
I highly recommend that you do that. And in fact, when you're a lot of big churches, if you're on their prayer team, they will teach you to pray with your eyes open so that you could see what's going on with the person who you're praying for. So that was just an afterthought here. Anyways, so we left off in chapter 2. I think we got through verse 17. And just for a recap, in the beginning of chapter 2, David was anointed king of Judah in Hebron. If you remember, after he inquired of God, or he was seeking God's guidance, while at the same time, Abner, here we go with the names again, he anoints Ishbosheth, king over Israel. In a sense, kind of creates a split in the kingdom. And they end up all meeting at the pool of Gibeon, which, if you remember, they kind of resulted in what turned into a brutal battle. We had the 12 people from David's side and the 12 people from Abner's side. They all decide to come around the pool to have a battle, possibly to determine who's going to win. And they all grabbed a hold of each other and ran their swords into each other's sides, and they all died, which did not end well as far as settling any disputes. But the rest of the chapter, from 17 until the end, it kind of concludes the story there, at least for now. So we're going to go ahead and read. We're just going to take this in one big chunk because there just isn't any real good spot to stop it or split it. Stephanie, are you back in here yet?
Yes, I'm in here.
All right. Well, we will if you just want to do 18 all the way through 32, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Sorry, I gotta pull it up.
That's okay. You're always busy, huh?
Well, my headset disconnected.
Oh.
So I had to exit Zoom and come back in.
Gotcha.
It does that because you made phone calls.
Yeah, it does.
My on speaker does the same thing.
Yeah, it's weird. And then when I try and select it, because you can select if it comes through speaker or the ear or headset, it won't let me select headset.
Yep, same here.
Okay, I got it open now.
Also, I wanted to make one more announcement. We have decided to take promotions during the Bible study. So if you get thirsty during the Bible study, enjoy a nice Diet Coke.
I got a Coke Zero right here.
They're cold and refreshing.
Oh, I don't drink Diet.
If you want something that's better than Diet Coke, drink Diet Pepsi.
Why?
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Wow. How many promotions do we have? Jeez.
I'm drinking Dr. Water.
I'm drinking Dr. Pepper right now.
I agree with you, Dwayne.
I just had to be contrary to Josh because he opened himself up for it.
Well, you're about to get muted.
I prefer Pepsi without the diet.
Oh, there you go.
How about we promote the Bible study?
Oh, okay,
Perfect.
sounds like a deal. Verses
ready?
18 through 32.
Okay. And the three sons of Zeruiah, yep, that's what it is. Zeruiah
That
were
is,
there.
that's right.
Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel?
Asul.
I believe you. Asul?
Asul, yeah.
Asul. Okay. Asul. Now, Asul was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle, and Asul pursued Abner, and he turned neither to the right hand nor to the left hand from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is it you, Asul?" And he answered, "It is I." Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left hand, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Asul would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asul, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" But he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out of his back. and he fell there and died where he was. And all who came to the place where Asul had fallen and died stood still. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. And as the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which lies before Giah, on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. And the people of Benjamin gathered themselves together behind Abner and became one group, and took their stand on the top of the hill. Then Abner called to Joab, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you tell your people to turn from the pursuit of their brothers?" And Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the men would not have given up the pursuit of their brothers until the morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men stopped and pursued Israel no more, nor did they fight any more. And Abner and his men went all that night through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole morning, they came to Mahanaim. Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing from David's servants 19 men besides Asul. But the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. And they took up Asul and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron.
All right, thank you. And I think we're going to do Psalm 120, if you want to find that here when we get done with this chapter right here. But, okay, we'll go ahead and jump back to verse 18, and it says, "And the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asul." Now, Asul, cancel that phone call. Where was I? Now, Asul was swift on his foot as a wild gazelle, and Zeruiah was. So let's just back up real quick here. That Zeruiah, that's David's sister, and Joab. I'm just trying to figure out my notes here. Anyways, Joab and Abishai and Asul were essentially David's cousins. And, here is a kind of an interesting tidbit I wanted to point out because David was, if you remember, he was the youngest of all his brothers. It's likely that he was probably about the same age or even younger of all, as his cousins there. And now here he is, the youngest, becoming the king, which was just unheard of in that culture at that time. But let's jump back in here. Verse 19. And Shaul pursued Abner, and as he went, he turned neither to the right hand nor to the left hand, to the left, following Abner. Shaul is the in the I guess in the pressure, I guess you could say, or the pressure of the confusion of the battle. He was able. Abner would have been very well protected, and he was able to get close enough to Abner to actually pursue him, to chase him. If you remember, Abner was the commander of Ishbosheth's army. And this is, I think, a really good indication on how the battle was going. Ishbosheth, his men, Abner's men, I don't think were doing all that well. For Shaul to be able to chase down and to kill Abner, it would have been devastating to Ishbosheth's army. If you remember, he's the commander of the army, and you chop the head off of the snake, and it's a lot easier just to do the rest of the snake. But at the same time, I can't help but to get the sense that Shaul might have been pursuing Abner for some personal glory, to be the man that would take down Abner in the midst of a battle would definitely bring some attention to that person. Let's see, where were we? In verse 20, then Abner looked behind him and said, "Is it you, Shaul?" And he answered, "It is I." Verse 21, Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Shaul would not turn aside from following him. So if you can only imagine, he's chasing him, and I can imagine there's probably a lot of other soldiers, a lot of other people that are around at the time, and instead of grabbing the easy fruit, I guess you could say, he's going after Abner, and just kind of passing everybody else by. And Abner here was, he's more than willing, I guess you could say, to sacrifice these young men in order to save himself, so that he didn't have to fight Shaul. At verse 22, and Abner said again to Shaul, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" Dwayne, go ahead.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you on Abner being willing to sacrifice the other people, but I think what I got out of the text is Abner, okay, he's the commander of the armies. He's got way more experience in such things as a Shaul. And he's fully aware that if Shaul catches him and Shaul wants to kill him, that he's going to have to kill Shaul. And he's also aware that he's competent enough to do it. That Shaul is not on par with him in terms of being. So it seems to me it wasn't so much of a, I mean, there might have been, turn aside and, take somebody on who's easier. Yes, there was that. But I honestly don't believe that Abner wanted to hurt Shaul. I think Abner was trying to reason with him. He's like, "Dude, you are chasing me down and I'm going to kill you if you don't stop. And I don't want to."
Well, Dwayne, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to respectfully, completely agree with you. You jumped in right before I got to that part in my notes. Whatever reason, no, that's quite all right. No, I'm actually pretty impressed that you picked up on that. Abner was a commander of the army for a reason, and yes, he was willing to sacrifice one of the other men so that he would not have to fight Shaul. But I think you're right. I think Abner, he was more than likely much more war ridden than Shaul was. And as we continue here, well, we kind of read through it once already. We find out that is absolutely the case. Because he ends up Abner kills Shaul. And but here we see that he kind of changes his strategy, and he starts to he tries to use kind of it would be an honor between officers. Again, you're spot on there, Dwayne, being that they're brothers essentially, and his Shul's brother was an officer. Obviously, Abner was an officer. I think it's very likely that he could have been trying to, out of respect or honor for his brother, he didn't want to fight him because he knew he was going to kill him. I suppose that there's definitely some truth in thinking that Abner knew that he was definitely more experienced than Shul, and that he would, like Dwayne had already mentioned, end up having to kill him. I'm just trying to skip over that part since Dwayne ruined it for me.
I'm going to shut up. I keep reading your Bibles. I'll shut up.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm giving you a hard time. I love it when you guys talk. I'm just giving you a hard time. Verse 23, but he refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out his back, and he fell there and died where he was. And all who came to that place where Shul had fallen and died stood still. I can imagine why they would stand still. I can imagine uh, Abner stopping and just ramming his spear backwards, and it probably caught him off guard, I think. Clearly we see that Abner did in fact kill Shul, and I think that this would definitely be a self-defense case if it were to go before a jury. And but if you think about it, it's really the only thing he could do. Shul was out for Abner's blood, and if he caught him, he was going to try to kill him. And so Abner really didn't have much choice. Um, and as far as his concern, because remember he said that how could I face your brother Joab? I think it was entirely justified. I don't think it was necessarily an excuse as much as it was reality that he would then have to break it to Joab that he had to kill his brother. But the fact that he killed him with the butt end of the spear kind of tells me that it was a pretty violent encounter. Like I said, I could just imagine Shul running up behind Abner, and Abner stopping and thrusting that butt of the spear end backwards, and it was such a forceful encounter that it went right through Shul's body. And this wasn't the pointy end; this was the blunt end. Dwayne.
Don't take this as dogmatic, but there are some parts in this text which I think are described on purpose. We need to remember one thing here. These are kinsmen fighting among kinsmen. This is tantamount to a civil war. This is Israel versus Judah. They're all supposed to be God's people. And now they're fighting amongst themselves. And so I think that is exemplified in the interchange that you have between Abner and Shul. That yes, they were brothers, they had a relationship. And I think pointing out that Abner didn't want to kill Shul before the actual combat was important. But I think the other thing that you need to look at is Abner never wanted to kill Shul, even during the combat. Abner wasn't using the dangerous side of his spear. Abner didn't turn the pointy end towards Shul. And what we need to look at, I think, in order to get that context out of it, was in the beginning when it said Shul was pursuing Abner, he would turn neither to the left nor to the right. He had a single-mindedness of purpose. And then Abner warned him. He said, dude, change your mind. Turn to the left, turn to the right. And Shul did not. I think Shul forced the encounter. I think probably there was more battle going on than just the one swift strike as a big, huge, giant surprise. I mean, in order to actually kill somebody with the blunt end of a spear, that person has got to, I don't know, you had to make Abner I think Abner probably fought with him for quite a while, and Shmuel probably did not give up until Abner finally said, "All right, fine, have it your way, buddy." But he didn't use the dangerous end of his spear, and I think that this is something that is reflected in the text that shows us Abner's intent was not to kill originally, and that it was something that was definitely forced upon him, a decision that he made that was against his wishes.
Yep, I have to agree with you. You know, I think he definitely had his mindset on killing Abner, and he wasn't willing to let up on that. And I think you have a very good point there. He could have turned the spear around. And also, you know, we should probably try to keep in mind that these spears, they weren't little 4-foot spears. You know, these things are probably about 8 feet tall. And so they were large. And so when you're running with it, I can imagine you would probably have 4 feet sticking out behind you. And so I think that's a great observation that it doesn't, well, you're right. I'm just going to say that it doesn't seem to appear to me that he was actually trying to kill him, but that's just kind of how it played out. Anybody else have any comments on that before we continue with verse 24? All righty, verse 24. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and as the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammon, which lies before Giah, on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. Now, you know, here's the thing. I mean, when you when you kill somebody who happens to have two brothers who, you know, are soldiers, there's a good chance that those brothers might make it their life mission to avenge their brother or to kill you. And so I can definitely understand why Joab and Abishai took off after him. Verse 25. And the people of Benjamin gathered themselves together behind Abner and became one group and took their stand on the top of the hill. Somebody pointed out to me when I'm reading, I tend to end everything in a question, so I'm trying not to do that today. Anyways, it's not surprising that the people here, I thought, well, why would they jump in behind Abner? And it's not really all that surprising because if you think about it, you know, Saul and his family, they were from the tribe of Benjamin. And even though there was a lot of things going on with Saul, he definitely has some mental issues going on up there. He was acting erratically and just continued to decline. That doesn't mean that everybody was against him. He still had plenty of supporters. And for Abner and his army and the Benjamites to take a stand at the top of a hill, that kind of makes sense to me because typically this would give him an advantage. You know, but I kind of get the sense by now that Joab had probably already weakened Abner's army to the point that even the Benjamites weren't going to be able to make much of a difference at that time. But let's go ahead and continue. Verse 26. Then Abner called to Joab, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you tell your people to turn from the pursuit of their brothers?" I did a translation comparison here, and the NLT puts it like this: Abner shouted down to Joab, "Must we always be killing each other? Don't you realize that bitterness is the only result? When will you call off your men from chasing their Israelite brothers?" I think it's important to remember here that Judah, you know, isn't battling the Philistines. They're battling Israel. And these are, like Dwayne had already mentioned, this is their kinsmen. It's their brothers. And Abner, who seemed rather confident back at the pool of Gibeon, you know, he's now kind of come to a standoff where he knows that he will likely be defeated. And I kind of get the sense here that Abner was kind of in a do or die moment. And that he decides to go ahead and make some kind of peace agreement. Verse 27. And Joab said, as God lives, if you guys feel free to type up anytime you want. It seems like I'm talking a lot here. Anyways, and Joab said, as God lives, if you had not spoken, surely the men would not have given up the pursuit of their brothers until the morning. Verse 28, so Joab blew the trumpet, and all the men stopped and pursued Israel no more, nor did they fight anymore. Verse 29, and Abner and his men went all that night through the, I didn't put the pronunciation for this one, Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole morning, they came to Mahanaim. Sorry about that. Verse 30, and Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all his people together, there were missing from David's servants 19 men besides Shaul. And the last verse, but the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. So I'm not sure if these numbers are include the 24 or not, but at the same time, as you can see, David and Joab, they only lost like 20 men, and Abner lost 360 men. Now we don't know if God himself ordained this battle. I didn't. It doesn't seem that he did, or maybe he did. Who knows? But the text just doesn't really tell us. But it does seem to me that God certainly had his hand in it. David is most definitely the victor here, and being that David was an anointed king that God had chosen, I could understand if God were to choose to go ahead and fight on the side of David and his men, because that's a pretty big swing there in the numbers. Verse 32, and they took up Shaul and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem, and Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron. I think the takeaway here might be that, when I look at Shaul, I get the sense, and I kind of believe that he was he wanted to kill Abner for some kind of personal glory. Like Dwayne had mentioned, he didn't turn from the left, he didn't turn to the right. He had his mind set on it, and I think that pursuing personal glory like Shaul likely was doing can kind of lead us into disasters and unforeseen consequences. Kind of like the butt of a spear in your stomach, and just my thought here would be that we would be better off to seek God's wisdom over our own, we'll say, impulsive zeal. But let me go ahead and ask the question here. I'll ask the question to myself. Are any of my pursuits that are being driven, are these pursuits being driven by my ego, or are they driven by divine guidance? And so I guess that would be the question I would ask you guys. You guys have any thoughts on that?
You asked that question again. It was kind of confusing.
Yeah, it was confusing in my head. I was asking myself when I wanted to be asking everybody else. But are any of your pursuits being driven by ego, or are they being driven by divine guidance? And how do we tell the difference? I mean, if you're out to accomplish something, how do you know whether it's being driven by your ego or being driven by divine guidance? Chris, go ahead.
I don't know about most of the stuff I do, but I do know that since I've taken a look at it, actually a deep look at it in the last couple of weeks, social media, whenever I make posts and stuff, it's always about the ego, always.
Mm-hmm.
I can thank Dwayne for that. He told me this about a month ago, and I just realized that looking at it 2 weeks ago, I was like, you know what? And I went back, looked at my post. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, Chris. I've got my little Tickety Talk channel there, and I don't. It's just I put together these little videos, and I catch myself, Chris. I look at them and I look at how many times they've been watched, or how many times were they liked, or how many well, what's the percentage of people that watched them all the way through, and then I see my numbers on my followers, and I can't help but to think that there might be some ego behind that as well. Otherwise, why would I take the time to even look? That's a
Yeah,
good point.
exactly.
Yep, that's a good point there. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, me, Vargas.
Vargas.
Yeah, I can't see if I'm talking or not, but I'm
You
thinking
are.
that everything I've done in life since the day I started working or even going to school, it's been about me. It's my ego. I don't think I ever asked God to guide me. Now that I ask Him to help me out through my life all the time, but most likely no, it wasn't Him um, giving me the idea. It's always been me. It's me, me, me.
Absolutely. And I don't ever want to say that Dwayne is right, so I won't. But he talks a lot about the ego, and there's been times that we've been in conversation, and he's brought it up that this was an ego issue with me, and I may or may not have gotten a little offended at it. I can neither confirm nor deny those accusations. But just like you were saying there, Robert, if you really think back, how much is our ego driving what we're actually doing? I would venture to say that it's a lot more than we want to admit. And so much so that here's one to think about, and you don't need to blurt it out, but how many times has our ego convinced our brains that that's what God wants us to do? Whatever it is. Like I joke around about me wanting to buy a new Corvette. Um, do I really want one? Yeah, I do. Would I ever go out of my way to purchase one in such a manner that probably wasn't as I should have? My ego says I probably would have at some point. How often do we want to say it's God that's leading us when in fact it is our ego? Um, but we could go on all day about that. Anybody else have any more thoughts? And Chris, did you have something, or did you just forget to put your hand down?
Christian unmuted.
I did unmute.
Christian, if you unmute, I can't see you because you're down lower, but if you unmute, that's the same as raising your hand. So go ahead.
Okay. Where my mind went was, I wonder how much times where, when something's been divinely guided, Lord told you to do something. I wonder how many times like that has turned into ego as you were doing it. Like for instance, what I mean is that like I believe the Lord called me to be a truck driver, and as I've been doing it, I have felt the temptation to look back at like, people who, from recent past who I'm like, oh, look how much, look what I'm doing now compared to what they're doing. Or like trying to compare myself to what, other people are doing. But the thing that I have ego in is the thing that the Lord told me to do. So I wonder if something we could think about also is that God's called us to do something, but how many times are we gonna puff it up and say, "Oh, I'm doing this," you take the Lord out of the picture and start getting ego about what the Lord called us to do. When in reality we should be saying how God's been doing it in our lives, not us.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point there. It used to annoy me when people always talked about heart posture and ego. I'm like, it's not always about ego. As life goes on, I'm starting to learn just like Christian had mentioned there, a lot of times, even when it's God ordaining us to do something, it can certainly turn into ego. I don't think anybody ever had to teach you to be prideful. Nobody ever had to guide your ego. I think it comes naturally, and I think that it's a part of our life that we have to live with and hopefully keep it under wraps. Keep it under control.
I learned to be
Anybody-
prideful from you, by the way.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Christian. I couldn't hear you. Anyways, we'll just go ahead and move on from there. If anybody else other than Christian doesn't have any more thoughts on that, we will go ahead and move on. Oh, all right. Well, we finished chapter 2, but before we jump into chapter 3, I want us to go ahead and jump over to Psalm 120. It's a short one. It's only 7 verses long, and although we don't know exactly who wrote the Psalm, is that how we pronounce Psalm? Because it doesn't, huh?
Psalm.
Psalm. Okay, see it. A lot of this stuff is inside jokes that I should probably explain before I start talking. Anyways, we don't know exactly who wrote it because it doesn't give us a specific name like some of the other ones do in the title, but the historical commentaries and traditions kind of attribute it to David. Because it's very similar to some of the other Psalms that David has written that we know he had written. Psalm 52, I think, if I remember right, would have been one of them. So they typically attribute this to David. This psalm it's a prayer of distress, is what it is, and the psalmist he asks for protection from lying lips and deceitful tongues, is how it's going to put it, and he kind of expresses the weariness of living among those who hate peace, who love war. And I can't help but to think that it kind of makes me think of the world we're living in today. It always seems like there's somebody wanting to go to war instead of loving the peace that would be better off for all of us. Anyways, this psalm, it's the first of 15 psalms. It's called the Song of Ascents, or they call it the Song of Decrees. And essentially what that is these psalms were sung by Jewish pilgrims who were traveling to Jerusalem for the annual feast. I guess you could say it was like ancient playlists for Jewish road trips. They were written and kind of intended to ensure a heartfelt type worship during the festival of Passover, and we got the festival of weeks and the festival of tabernacles. As they were traveling, they would be singing these songs, trying to prepare their hearts and their minds for these different feasts. But let's go ahead and jump into it. If you want to go ahead, Miss Stephanie, and just read the whole psalm.
Okay. It's titled, Deliver Me, O Lord, a Song of Ascents. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from my lying lips, from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue, a warrior's sharp arrow, the glowing coals of the broom tree? Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech. Okay, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war.
I'll go ahead because I don't think I put it into my notes, but when it says, woe to me, I sojourned in Meshech, and I dwell among the tents of Kedar, essentially what that is just saying is over a large area, because Kedar and Meshech were pretty far apart. So I don't know if I actually made that into my notes, but the psalm here starts with a cry for help. it starts with like a personal testimony of finding refuge in God. While the psalmist was distressed by the lies and from the slander that he was experiencing, and then it jumps into the consequences of a deceitful tongue and divine judgment against the slandering that's going on here. And I think we can see how this possibly relates to David during this time, as far as loving the peace, or hating peace and loving the war. And keep in mind, you guys, a lot of these psalms we don't know exactly. We don't have any concrete proof. They try to put the psalms together with the time period as best they can, considering what's going on in the psalm and where it's dated at. Anyways, but as it closes here, it kind of closes out with this conflict of peace versus war. Go ahead, Stephanie.
This line here, I don't understand it. With glowing coals of the broom tree, is that supposed to mean something? Should I know what that means?
I didn't break it down verse by verse. I'm trying not to do that in case Dwayne gets to it when he's doing the Psalms. So I don't know. I just try to take a look at it as a whole. Does anybody have any idea on that?
I do not. I will have to investigate that.
I don't
Okay.
have an
All right,
idea
like
on it either, but Chris has his hand up.
It's still up. He raised it when he was speaking before, and he never put it down. Thank you, though.
Am I able to put it down?
You are. Yep. You just hold him down and push lower hand.
Oh, okay. Hold it down and lower hand. See, I did not know we could do that. All right. When I go through these Psalms, I try to just kind of look at them as a whole, and maybe the purpose of it is to give us an idea of what David was going through at the time when he wrote these Psalms, and I try to see if there's an application that we can glean from it. And I think in this Psalm, it would be, I'll go ahead and let Tony go first. How's that?
Okay, I looked it up, and it is, oh, come on, ting phone. It says, a broom tree is a flowering desert shrub 6 to 10 feet tall, common in the Middle East and known for providing shade, shelter, and high-quality fuel, notably featured in the Bible.
What was the line again?
A broom tree.
No, the line in the
Embers.
Psalm.
Embers.
A warrior
Yeah.
sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree.
Yeah, it
Now,
says
read-
its roots and branches make excellent charcoal.
So read the verse before and after, and the verse that you had the questions that have some context.
Okay, what shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongues? A warrior's sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree. Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar.
The context doesn't help. That's why I was so questioning it.
It doesn't.
No, I'll have to do some homework on that one.
It just says that it's, they use it for all kinds of things. Shelter, fuel, weapons.
I have a sneaking suspicion it has something to do with the fact that they used it for shade and that it's burning, but it also could have to do with the fact that it does create coals. I don't know. Can you text me that Psalm number and I will do some homework on it?
Psalm 120, if somebody can do. I wonder if it has something to do, because it's a warrior sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree. I wonder if it has something to do with something they did to the arrows, maybe to sharpen them and harden the tips. I don't know. That is a very good question.
Being that it's poetical, I don't think it has practical application. I think it's symbolic.
And that could very well be the case. We need to be careful how we read and interpret certain different types of literature, such as, like Dwayne had just pointed out, is poetic, and that's going to be interpreted a little bit different than if it's historical. So it could definitely have some symbolism there. But what I was getting to is, the application that I was able to pull out of this was, even when we're facing verbal attacks or gossip, I guess, trying to apply it to ourselves, or lies or so on, that is God. God is the ultimate protector, and he is the source of our comfort, and we should pursue peace even when we find ourselves in a hostile environment. Even when others choose conflict, we should probably strive for peace. Even if it means putting away our pride. It's that ego there a little bit. Go ahead there, Wes.
In the NLT 3 and 4, it says, "O deceptive tongue, what will God do to you? How will he increase your punishment? You will be pierced with sharp arrows and burned with glowing coals."
That's different.
So it does have something to, have something to do with what's going to happen to those with deceitful tongues. It's the punishment they're going to suffer, I think, is what he's referring to.
I appreciate you bringing that out. And coming from a guy that was a King James only for many, many, many years, I think that this is one of the benefits of using multiple translations, because it may, the ESV that we read, although it's more of a word for word type translation, it still isn't very clear what it's talking about. And then Wes was able to jump over to the NLT, and it now makes a little bit more sense to us. The difference is not that they're changing God's word, but the difference is they're just, so a lot of these translations are putting it into language that we can understand a little bit better. And so when you go from a word for word type translation all the way through a thought for thought, it's not that anyone is right, and maybe there are some that's wrong, but it just gives us, it describes it in a way that it might help us understand a little bit better. Thank you very much for that, Wes. You got anything else? All righty.
No, that was it.
Okie doke. Miss Stephanie, would you mind jumping into 2 Samuel chapter 3, and we're just going to do verses 1 through 6 for right now.
Okay. It says Abner joins David, starting verse 1. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And the sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam of Jezreel. And his
Maggie,
second...
how you doing? Really, really good. Thank you for picking me up.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think that was Robert. Go ahead.
And his second, Kilib.
Are you like in the? Is that the Bible study?
Yeah.
Robert Vargas, you're not muted.
I don't know. I sent it to him, but he don't.
I got it.
Not listening to him.
Is that the same one that you guys always listen to?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So
I'm just going to start over in verse 2. But how is that? Is it Kiliab?
Kiliab.
Kiliab, okay. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his second, Kiliab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, and the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah. Is that right?
No, it's Maacah. Maacah.
Okay.
Like
Maacah.
M-A-Y. Yep.
Okay. Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Jeshur. And the fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. and the sixth Ithream of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. You want to go through 6 or 2-6?
I'm just going to have you stop right there because I'm not going to go back through and reread those. I don't have a whole lot of notes between 1 and 5, and
You don't want to read those names again?
You
I've
nailed
got
them all,
them.
Stephanie, except for one. Adonijah.
Which one is that?
Adonijah, not Adonijah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense.
I've got to tell you, it is
You
amazing.
nailed the rest of them.
It's amazing how well she does with these names because I'm sounding them out with the pronunciations that I have, and I can't even get them that good. And I've got the pronunciations in front of me. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and stop right there real quick. And as we can see here, David, this is during David's time in Hebron. And it would appear that David fathers 6 different children from 6 different women. It's assumed at this point he was a very busy boy, and he just seems to get busier.
What
But it is
Josh?
Yep, you're breaking up too. Don't make me do that. Anyways,
I really appreciate the first part, dudes.
Yeah. We'll put Stephanie back on that if necessary, okay? But the text doesn't tell us that he was specifically married to all 6 women, but it is assumed that at this point he had at least 6 wives. We don't know if there was any more that just never had the children, but we're assuming that he had at least 6 wives, and this was certainly an oopsie on David's part. And the reason why I say that is Deuteronomy 17:17 states, and I quote, "And he," and that's referring to the king, "shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart be turned away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive gold." It was, but in this day, I think we need to consider, and this culture at this time, it was pretty common for a king to take many wives. And it was one way that great men, I guess you could say, and especially kings, would express their power or their status by taking many wives or concubines. But God had already made it known at that point that an anointed king of Israel was not to take on many wives, and yet David seems to be doing it.
Well, this comes back and bites David in the ass again too. It bites most people in the ass when they do it.
I think that in every instance in the Bible that they did that, it comes back to bite him in the rear end. And I just put a little note in parentheses. I wrote down, but it would seem that power can corrupt even a man after God's own heart, because he jumps right into it. But I think there's some method behind his madness that we'll get to. Because it would appear that David might have been working on securing allies around the region where he was at. We know that at least one of his wives, which was Maacah, was the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. So we know she was a princess there, and it's believed that the last 3 wives are also from important families or powerful families from around that area. But I think the important part here, and I don't know if Kinsey's in here, but I threw this one in here for him. The important part is that we recognize that this is a descriptive text and not a prescriptive, meaning it's just simply describing what David was doing. It's not saying that it's okay for us to do it. So, let's not start jumping up and down thinking we can have multiple wives, because I don't think that's what the text is telling us at all. It's just describing what David did, not what we should do. I'm going to go ahead and just read verse 6 real quick, and then I'll have you jump back in there, Stephanie. Verse 6, "While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul." So previously, a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned that Abner likely anointed Ishbosheth as king, likely as a move to bring more power to himself. As we see here, Abner, he was making himself strong in the house of Saul, bringing substance to this belief that, these commentators believe that he was kind of doing it to strengthen himself, or he was positioning himself to be the power behind the throne. As I think, as we can all see here, David is growing stronger. And as we will soon see, things will not be going so well for Abner and Ishbosheth. I jotted down a question here. The question is, how do you think we can apply David's growing strength through God's sovereignty to our own lives today? And I sat there and I thought about that question a little bit, and I thought, wow, I would probably struggle to answer that right off at the top of my head. So in my own life, I had a moment to think about it. I can trust that no matter how messy things seem to be, that trusting in God and his sovereignty, and God knowing that God is supreme, I guess you could say, or the almighty ruler over all creation, and that God, he possesses the power and wisdom and authority to ordain and govern all things in our life to his purpose. That's kind of what his sovereignty would mean there. He will work all things out in accordance to those who love him. And what the conclusion I came to is that if I abide in him, or when I follow him, that he will be the one to strengthen me, and that he will be the one to bring increase in accordance to his will. So back to the question, do you guys, what are you guys' thoughts on that? How do you think we can apply David's growing strength through God's sovereignty to our own lives today? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? It got really, really quiet.
Ask it again.
Okay,
Please.
okay. No, I can do that. How do you think we can apply David's growing strength, the fact that David was growing stronger through God's sovereignty to our own lives? Essentially, sovereignty is that God possesses the power to ordain and govern all things in our lives in
Like the
accordance to his
supreme
will.
strength, there's the supreme ruling
Yes.
of God's nature.
It encompasses more than power. It encompasses his right to do so.
Yes.
You can see it in the things around us. The good things that happen, you can just see it in the things that happen around us all the time. I know I keep coming back to this, but my son is a prime example.
Tony, I think your son will be a prime example for many things to come in our future here, because that is just amazing, and I think you're absolutely right there.
That's all.
All right. Okay, well, with that said, then why don't we go ahead and do verses, let's see, what time is it? 7 through 11.
Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers, and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman." How far did you want to go through 11?
Yes.
Okay. God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him.
Okay, so if we go back to verse 7, it says, "Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, Rispua, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Ishbosheth here, I thought, well, that's just kind of random and out of the blue, but what he's doing, he's making a very serious accusation. Even though Seth is gone, for somebody to take a royal concubine was regarded as both it was sexual immorality type sin as well as treason. This would be seen as kind of a move on the throne on Abner's part. But we'll get into that in just a minute. Verse 8 says, "Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, 'Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers, and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman.'" I could just imagine the way that came out of his mouth. And you're charging me today with a fault concerning a woman? Maybe in disbelief. I don't know. We're not told whether or not Abner actually made this move on Saul's woman. If Abner was trying to empower himself, I could see him doing this, while at the same time, if in that I'm kind of going with this the second part, the second idea here, and that is if Ishbosheth thought that Abner was getting a little too powerful, this could simply be Ishbosheth's way of getting rid of Abner. We jump into verse 9 here. "God do so to Abner and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him." Verse 10, "To transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba." That's just meaning again over a wide area. Dan and Beersheba were pretty far apart there. And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. So I think we've discussed this before, and I'm sure that Abner already knew. In fact, I think it's supported here in the previous verses that David was God's anointed king. And yet, if we think back, he still decides to fight on the wrong side, at least at first here. And I suppose the threat of death, because the punishment for treason was death, due to this possible treason charge, it kind of has a way of redirecting one's loyalty. And I think that we can all agree here that Abner joining David was certainly the right thing to do, but I believe he did it for the wrong reasons. Abner seems to be side swapping, I guess you could say, either because he was afraid of Ishbosheth, that he would have his men arrest him and possibly kill him, or Abner was offended at Ishbosheth's accusations. I don't see a whole lot in the text as a support that he actually did it, and he just when I'm looking at it and I'm seeing his reaction to it, it would kind of seem to me that the accusation was unfounded. But either way, Abner knew that David was God's anointed king. The right thing to do would have been to join David from the start instead of anointing Ishbosheth himself. With that said, does anybody have any observations or anything they want to throw in there?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So after someone dies, does that mean that their concubines are still theirs?
If he's royalty, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how that plays out. Is that their concubines forever?
That's what I'm curious about.
Can they be inherited? From what I could understand, at least up until this point, she was still considered a royal concubine and still considered to be property of Saul. And so this would be, and we're going to kind of see this play out a little bit later when we get to David and which son is it? starts with an A. Anyways, when he wants to kind of pull a power play on his dad, and he starts we'll just say going into all of his concubines on top of a building in front of everybody. And hey, David Angel, your hand is up. Go ahead.
You're muted, Mr. Angel.
If we equated that to royalty today, especially in China, Korea, or Russia, but even England, I would think that somebody who had no right to royal courts would be considered in violation of law if they just decided to go on to the royal courts and take whatever they wanted. Abner wasn't royalty, although he was high in the military. He wasn't royalty. So if that makes any sense, I was just thinking that's not something that would happen even today.
That does make sense, actually. A lot of sense.
With property of royalty.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I was looking into it. I wanted to kind of find out because I love the cultural thing, and it didn't really go any deeper other than she still would have been the property of Saul, and so it seems like it would have been frowned on for even one of Saul's sons to do the same thing, as we're going to see when we get to David. So yeah, I don't know how that plays out. That's kind of interesting.
Now was this Mephibosheth, or however you say it, was he already ordained by David as partial ruler to honor oh my goodness, I can't think of David's friend's name right now. Saul's son.
Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan. I was going to say John, but I wasn't sure. But David at some point brought him into the royal court with him to honor Jonathan. And I don't know if that's in play at this particular time in these verses or not. So he would have a right as royalty to challenge the non-royal for invading royalty property. Whether she belonged to Saul still or not, she was still royal property.
Yes, and Ishbosheth was hold on, I got my phone here. Hold on. Okay, I didn't know if that it was my daughter-in-law just had a baby. And so I wanted to make sure everything was still okay there. Everything is fine. Anyways, Ishbosheth is the last remaining son of Saul that we know of. And you're right, Abner was not royalty. So whether or not Ishbosheth could have, taken control of his father's property in that way, I simply don't know the answer to. But Abner certainly was not supposed to do it. But like I said, just kind of looking at the text and getting we'll call it the vibe. I'm not too sure if Abner even did that. It seems more likely to me that Ishbosheth recognized how strong Abner was getting and knew he needed to do something about it. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Actually, it would have fallen on Abner to make sure. Okay, you remember Saul got killed. Abner was the head of Saul's army. It would have been Abner's responsibility to make sure that Saul's heir received the throne. What Abner did for Ishbosheth, while it may have been a power play, like you were saying, and politically motivated, it was also out of loyalty to the house of Saul that he served to ensure that his son was put on the throne. That's part of his duties to make sure in the event of his death that his son gets that throne.
Well, and outside the loyalty part of it, it just simply was customary. The throne should have gone to the next son in line, which obviously would have been Ishbosheth.
It was part of Abner's duties, and thus it was within his right to actually put Ishbosheth on the throne.
Nope, you are absolutely correct there. The only reason why I say that it would have been the right thing for him to side with David is because at this point, I think it was pretty well known that David had already been anointed king by God through Samuel, and therefore, I think that the custom that they had for the ancient Near Eastern times should have been, would have been overridden by that point.
I apologize. I joined in the middle of this. I was checking in, so I may have misunderstood what you were saying.
Oh, I'm not quite sure. No, you brought up a good point. I'm glad you did, because you're absolutely right that typically what should have happened was Ishbosheth would have been anointed king over Israel. I was just bringing up the point that because David had already been anointed king by Samuel, that Ishbosheth would have known that at that point. Do we have any more thoughts here before we continue on?
I have one.
All right, Chris.
So you and Dwayne have both said that, this would be customary of the time for the Jewish people, these different things, for Abner to secure the throne for Ishbosheth, and for this to happen or that to happen. But we have to remember that Israel did not have any kings until Saul. So none of this is customary. It's all brand new to them. So if you look at the underlying thing of that, all these things are new to the Jewish people at that time. That's all I had to say.
This is a true statement. You're right. They did not have any kings before this. However, they did have the models and examples of all the other kingdoms around them. And that's what they were asking for in the very beginning. So while they've never done this before, they are basing most of their kingship and their rules and everything very solidly off of the examples of the kingdoms set around them. Because that's what they were after to begin with, to be like other nations.
And that's the downfall of the monarchy of the Jewish people.
Yeah, that was definitely the downfall. God should have been their ruler and their king, and they wanted a king like everybody else. And when I started this study in First Samuel, and as I continued through it, I've got to tell you, and I don't throw a lot of it into my Bible study because I just don't think that it's going to benefit us as far as what we're trying to learn. But I got to tell you, I am shocked with how much the Israelites are wrapped up in the customs of the surrounding nations and vice versa. It's if you look at the area on the map of where all these different kingdoms lived, in a broader picture, it's a very, very small area. And it's not only there's not, I mean, you can go beyond just the monarchy for being cross-cultural. I mean, it's in the worship of their gods. It's in just about everything they do. And I can't remember, I'll get to you in just a second, Mr. Angel. And I can't remember what Bible study it was in, but it was in Genesis, I believe it was, where we were talking about, that the God of Israel was a God without borders. And, in the Israel at that time, they would have recognized that the gods in that area couldn't go beyond their borders. And so that's what they believed. And so God had to come out and make it a point to let them know it was with, what was it, Jacob, I believe, that, God was not confined to the borders of Israel, that God was the God of all land, and which was a smack in the face for all the surrounding nations and their gods. Mr. Angel, go ahead.
I don't want to start a whole nother discussion on this. I just want to insert this for people to think about. Why would Israel want a king in the flesh as opposed to the king they had in spirit through observing the other kingdoms around them? What did the other kingdoms have in relation to a king that was a man that Israel didn't have when the king was God? Why would they want a flesh king? And then I want to drop that. I don't want to stir the pot and get that started, but there's some underlying thoughts there that might answer the question why they insulted God in the first place and wanted a king like the other nations.
Yeah, Dwayne, I see. Yeah, real quick, I'll say I think part of it is a lack of faith and trust in God, because a king at the time, they would lead the people into battles. They would rule over the people, and they weren't trusting in God. Anyways, you're right. Let's not get too much into it. I'll let Dwayne do that.
I think one of the big reasons Israel wanted a king was because they wanted to be like the other nations. And there was a lot of things going on in the other nations that really seemed like a good idea at the time, like prostitutes and prostitution and all this other stuff. I mean, it was a desire to imitate some of the things that were perceived as fun and desirable in the that were sinful. I think that's a big reason why. I mean, we have all of this time where Israel mimicked the nations around it over and over and over again throughout the judges and the prophets and stuff before they had kings. This isn't a new thing. Israel desires, they have that sinful nature, and they desire to have all the things that the other nations had. And they figured if they had a king like the other nations, that maybe they could have those things as well. I think that had a lot to do with it.
Lowering
Especially when
the
you
standard.
consider for the next 400. Especially when you consider for the next 400 years, only 4 of the 40 kings were called good.
8 of them were called good, but out of 32, yeah, that's not good odds. None of the ones in Israel were called good.
Nope, it's just, yeah, you're right. Stephanie has been very patient with her hand up. Let's go ahead and, what do you got, Stephanie?
I was just going to say that at the beginning of 1 Samuel, before God lets it be known to Samuel that Saul is his chosen one to be the anointed king of Israel, Samuel asks the people this exact question that Mr. Angel just asked. Samuel talks to the people of Israel, and he tries to warn them that what they're going for is kind of going away from God's plan, but they have a true king. Samuel tells them all of this, and they don't care. They want to be like the people around them. They don't want to be different. They want to be just like everyone else.
Yep, I was actually going to say that the actual reason that they gave was because they wanted to be like everybody else. Anybody else have any thoughts on that, or any comments or critiques, or no? All right. Well, considering it's 6:25, I could say we're going to go ahead and close down there, because it's a good place to stop, and it is because I don't have any notes after that. That's all I
Okay,
have.
so we'll be starting in 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 12 next week.
Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the time we've spent together in your word today. We ask that the truths we've studied would take root in our hearts and guide us in our daily lives. Help us to walk closer with you, to trust you more deeply, and to reflect your love and grace to those around us. Keep each person watching safe, strengthen their faith, and remind them that you are always with them wherever they go. We thank you for your word, for your mercy, and for your constant presence in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And if you'd like to connect with us, scan the QR code on your screen to find our Facebook page. Send us a message to find out how to join our live Bible studies and fellowship with us. Thank you again for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.